Hi everyone, welcome back to my countdown of my top 20 favorite films of all times list. Let's not waste any time, let's get right into number 12. Number 12. Princess Mononoke. This is not my only entry in terms of anime on this list. We've still got 11 more to go after this, and there's at least one other anime on the list. The reason I include Princess Mononoke is because I knew I wanted to include something from Miyazaki, because Miyazaki has had a very big impact on my life in terms of his films. And Princess Mononoke, I think I saw for the first time when I was 10 years old. It was the first Miyazaki movie I had ever seen, and I know I keep saying, like, oh, this was the first of this director I had seen. I was like, it wasn't necessarily that this was the first I had seen of every single director, but Mononoke was my favorite for the longest time of Miyazaki's movies. And even now, I honestly can't think of a movie I remember as fondly as I do as Princess Mononoke. And the reason I think for is because, despite the fact I saw Spirited Away a few years after I'd seen Princess Mononoke, something about Princess Mononoke, the story, I think, because it was a bit more of a mature context, despite the fact that Spirited Away is like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, a sort of take on the Odyssey, which we studied in my class. Like, Spirited Away does have a lot of similarities when it comes to the Odyssey, which, for that aspect, I do really enjoy. But there's something about Spirited Away that is a little too much of the Disney formula that we've become very used to in the West, and and I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm not saying that's negative at all. I'm just saying, like, it's a little too much like what I'm used to, and as a result, I don't think I appreciate it in terms of someone else's take on it. Whereas with Princess Mononoke, considering I saw it before that, I saw it before I saw Spirited Away, and I feel that Princess Mononoke has a much more adult tone to it. It's a much more mature film. It's not as directed towards kids because of the very blatant violence that's in the movie, as well as the just the casting choices in general. You have Minnie Driver, you have Billy Bob Thornton in this. You know, you have actors that are that just their voices just naturally sound so much more mature, especially the way that Minnie Driver was directed in the dub version. And I am going to use the dub version as my reference point because I've only ever watched the dub. I've never watched the Japanese version of the film, and the dub is what I watched the very first time I saw it. I absolutely loved it. It just seemed like it was the more adult way of telling the story. It wasn't doing it in sort of an after-school special kind of way in terms of the environmental message. To me, if you're going to do an environment movie, this is the way to do it. It's not necessarily shoved in your face with its message and how it relates to the modern era. It's a little more subtle than that, and as well you have more complexities thrown into it. You have economics thrown into it, and it's not even the economics in the sense of presenting it in a modern era. You're presenting it in a more historical setting, and yet you have the fact that there are two sides of this argument, that there is not necessarily a bad guy in this. You have people who do things for wrong reasons, but at the same time, it's very true to reality. I mean, if you think about the way that the United States government is currently going about the whole climate change issue, you have people very similar to what we could call the antagonists of Princess Mononoke. You have people that are more concerned about the economy and businesses and jobs than they are about the well-being of the planet, and the fact that, you know, what we're doing to it is having an effect, and you can't deny that. But that's very much the argument that we're still having to this day, and this film very eloquently provides the two sides of the argument. Of course, we're more willing to align with one side of it because one is presented as the more holy side of the argument, like in terms of, like, you know, we're siding with the environment and the animals because they are presented as gods and demons and stuff, so they're the ones with the big holy powers and whatever. Versus the other side, which is man. And for some reason in these movies, we've always got to side against man, despite the fact we are man. We're like, yes, death to humans! It's like, what? But in my personal opinion, this movie is very much the way that I want to see movies like this with these kinds of messages but done in a more adult way, which is really ironic because people tend to look at anime and they tend to they look at it and they immediately think it's dumbing down stuff down for children, that all of it is just either porn or for children. And in reality, anime has such a broad spectrum of genres and demographics that it should appeal to. I mean, you have anime that ranges from literally toddlers all the way to pornography, but there's a huge gap in between that anime just fills to the brim with numerous different types of genres and subcultures. There's pretty much an anime for everybody, which is why it annoys me when people say, "Oh, you're an anime type of person." I'm like, "No, everyone can like it. You just need to find a show that you like." Just because I tend to enjoy a lot of anime doesn't mean I enjoy all anime. For example, I really don't like slice of life anime all that much. I find it incredibly boring. The only slice of life anime that I've ever liked is Toradora and Kids on the Slope. And even for those reasons, Toradora just had this natural kind of charm to it that I think was a little bit more inviting than I think most other slice of life anime is. And Kids on the Slope had the nice little rounding of the fact that it was directed and it's by the same guy who did Cowboy Bebop, and the music was also done by Yoko Kanno, whose music is just absolutely amazing. Plus, it's jazz music centered, so it's like it's not what you would typically expect from slice of life. They do it in a different way, which is why I like it so much. Getting back to Princess Mononoke, this is very much a movie that I think drove home that point. It drove home the point that not all anime has to be for kids. If anything, I think Spirited Away kind of brought that back a little bit in the sense that you can tell Spirited Away is much more directed towards children, mainly just with its protagonist. The fact that we're kind of viewing this whole world from a child's perspective, it's very much the Alice in Wonderland kind of perspective, but it's done a little more kid friend. Like I know Alice in Wonderland isn't really the best example, but the thing is, Alice in Wonderland also had a bit of a mature origin. It wasn't necessarily written explicitly for kids, but Disney managed to find a way that made it accessible to children. And I think Spirited Away does that with anime again. It's like Princess Mononoke made anime accessible for adults, but then Spirited Away kind of made it go back to the children thing again. And that's kind of the big battle I've always kept having with Hayao Miyazaki and a lot of anime in general, is like we take one really big step forward in getting people to like anime and showing them that it can be quality artwork and it can be really good. And then, you know, stuff just kind of pulls us back into the whole we are a niche and we only a certain subset of people really like it because it's mainly for kids, and it's not. That really bothers me. In terms of the animation, I still think it's one of Miyazaki's best works. It's like, and it's sort of weird because I'm not really a spiritual person. I'm not really a philosophical person, but I think something about the movie, because of this sort of philosophical aspect to it, it's something about the animation just has that little bit of extra spark to it that I can't quite explain as to why I like it so much. This is a film that realistically I have to suggest to anyone who has never watched Miyazaki before, because it was the first Miyazaki I had ever seen, and it made me a huge fan of his work. And if people say, you know, oh, I'm not really that into anime, you know, it's sort of one of the things I'll be like, here, watch Princess Mononoke. It's not what you think it is. It can be deep. It can be thought provoking. It can be artistically done. It doesn't just have to be for kids. And you know, that's what kind of ends up happening a lot of the time is people watch it and they go, oh, I see that now. This is. So that's my number 12. Come back tomorrow for number 11 and keep watching to find out what my number 1 favorite film of all time is. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you later.